Somewhere in a cedar chest, wrapped in a felt pouch nobody has opened since a wedding 40 years ago, sits a tiara that everyone in the family assumes is plastic. It got worn once, for a handful of photographs, then packed away and quietly forgotten while the rest of life moved on around it. No one thought to insure it. No one thought to ask a jeweler to take a look. And that single assumption, the idea that something this delicate-looking couldn't possibly be worth anything, is exactly why tiaras are one of the most quietly undervalued categories in all of vintage jewelry. Today we are counting down 10 old tiaras that collectors are paying real money for, and there's a real chance one of them is sitting in your attic right now. Number 10. Victorian paste tiaras. Let's start with the piece almost everyone gets wrong the moment they see it, because paste has a reputation problem it never deserved. The second most people hear the word paste, their brain translates it straight to fake, and they stop looking any further. That's a mistake, and it's an expensive one. Paste is not costume jewelry in the modern sense. It's hand-cut leaded glass foiled on the back to throw light like a diamond, and set by hand into silver by craftsmen working in the 1830s through the 1880s, at a time when the technique required real skill and real patience, not a factory stamping out identical pieces by the thousand. The good stuff was never meant to be cheap. It was meant to be worn by women who could not afford actual diamonds but absolutely refused to look like it, and jewelers built entire reputations on making that illusion convincing under candlelight. A well-preserved Georgian or Victorian paste tiara with its original silver mount and closed-back foiled stones can bring $800 to $2,500 at auction. And the rare examples with articulated spring-mounted sprays that tremble when you walk have crossed $6,000. Here's the test that separates paste from modern rhinestone in about 10 seconds. Turn it toward a window and look at the back of the stones. Genuine old paste has a closed foil back, a thin metal backing sealed behind the glass to boost the sparkle, something no modern manufacturer bothers doing anymore because it's slow and expensive. Modern rhinestone is open-backed almost every time. If you see foil, stop treating it like a wedding prop and start treating it like an asset. Number 9. Art Deco bandeau tiaras. This is the flapper-era piece, the low, straight-across band worn tight against the forehead, and it gets dismissed constantly because it doesn't look like a tiara at all to modern eyes. No arch, no points, none of the fairy tale silhouette people expect when they picture the word tiara. It looks like a headband with some sparkle glued on, and that unfamiliar shape is precisely why so many end up sold for pocket change at estate sales by people who don't recognize what they're holding. But the 1920s bandeau was the single most fashionable headpiece a wealthy woman could own, and the good ones were built by serious jewelry houses using platinum, old European cut diamonds, and geometric onyx or sapphire accents straight out of the deco design language. A signed platinum and diamond bandeau from a recognized maker has sold for $18,000 to $40,000, depending on stone quality. And even the unsigned examples in solid platinum with genuine old-cut diamonds routinely clear 5 figures once someone actually has them appraised instead of guessing at over a kitchen table. The detail that trips people up every time. Platinum from this era often looks dull and gray, almost like pewter, because it tarnishes differently than silver and nobody in the family ever had it cleaned properly. People assume dull metal means cheap metal. It's the opposite. Have it tested before you let it go for scrap value. Number 8. Signed crown Trifari bridal tiaras. Now we're in familiar territory if you've ever gone digging through a costume jewelry box, because Trifari's name shows up constantly in this world for a reason. What most people don't realize is that Trifari didn't just make brooches and clip earrings. Through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, they produced elaborate rhinestone bridal tiaras that were sold in department stores and worn by ordinary brides who could never have afforded real diamonds for one single afternoon. And those tiaras were treated as disposable the moment the wedding ended. Most of these get treated exactly like what they look like. A few dollars of plastic and glass glued to a wire frame and sold for next to nothing at yard sales every single week across the country. But a signed crown Trifari tiara in excellent condition, no missing stones, no bent prongs, original silver tone or rhodium plating still intact, brings $300 to $900 among collectors who specifically hunt bridal costume jewelry from this exact period. The elaborate floral and scroll designs from the immediate post-war years, when Trifari's chief designer Alfred Philippe was still applying real jewelry technique to costume work he'd learned at a fine Parisian house, climbs even higher than that. Flip the tiara over and look along the base of the frame for the tiny crown stamped above the letter T. No crown usually means a later, less desirable piece. The crown changes the entire conversation. Number 7. Sterling silver marcasite tiaras. Marcasite gets treated like the poor relation of the jewelry world, and I understand why. The stones are small, dark, and metallic gray instead of bright and flashy, so they read as dull rather than valuable the instant someone glances at them under a lamp. But genuine old marcasite, cut from iron pyrite and hand-set in sterling silver during the 1920s and 30s, one tiny faceted stone at a time, is a completely different animal from the marcasite, look pieces made later in cheap alloy for the mass market. A well-constructed sterling marcasite tiara from this period, with hundreds of individually set stones arranged in a symmetrical deco pattern, sells for $400 to $1,200 in good condition. And Art Nouveau examples with figural or nature-inspired motifs go considerably higher than that. Here's the giveaway test. Genuine sterling marcasite has real weight to it. Pick it up and it should feel substantial, almost surprisingly heavy for its size, because you're holding solid silver, not thin-plated pot metal stamped out in a factory. If it feels light and tinny, you're probably looking at a later reproduction. If it feels like it belongs in your hand, you might be holding something that belongs behind glass in a display case. Number 6. Kokoshnik-style tiaras. This is the shape everyone recognizes without knowing its name, the tall, fan-shaped tiara that flares upward from the forehead like a halo, borrowed from traditional Russian headdresses and adopted by European royal jewelers in the late 1800s, who fell in love with the drama of the silhouette. Because the shape is so distinctive and so specific, people who inherit one often assume it's either a stage costume piece or a modern reproduction made for a themed wedding, and they price it accordingly, which is to say, barely at all. But genuine Kokoshnik tiaras made in diamonds, pearls, or fine paste by serious workshops in the Edwardian era are some of the most actively collected tiara styles that exist today, precisely because the shape is so instantly recognizable and so tied to a specific glamorous moment in jewelry history that collectors romanticize endlessly. A well-documented antique Kokoshnik in silver-topped gold with old-cut diamonds has sold at auction for $30,000 to $80,000, and even modest paste or silver examples without provenance bring several thousand simply because the form itself commands a premium regardless of the materials underneath it. Check the mounting technique on the back. Hand-cut, irregular prong work with slightly uneven spacing points to genuine period construction done by a single craftsman rather than a machine. Machine uniform prongs almost always mean later manufacture. Number 5. Convertible tiaras. This is the piece that fools people not because it looks cheap, but because it doesn't look complete. A convertible or transformable tiara was designed in the 19th and early 20th centuries to break apart into smaller pieces, a necklace, a set of brooches, a pair of hair combs, so a wealthy woman could get more wear out of one significant jewelry purchase instead of letting it sit in a safe for one occasion a year. The problem is that generations later, families almost never inherit all the pieces together. They get a strange curved frame with hinge marks and empty attachment points, and because it doesn't look like a complete tiara anymore, it gets treated as broken jewelry rather than as one component of something that was originally worth a great deal more than the frame alone suggests. A documented convertible tiara frame, even missing its detachable elements, still carries value on its own, typically $2,000 to $6,000, depending on metal and stone quality. But complete sets where a family manages to locate the matching necklace or brooches in another box entirely can sell for 4 to 5 times that amount once reassembled as a unified piece. If your tiara has small hinges, loops, or unused prong settings along the frame that don't seem to connect to anything, don't assume it's broken. Assume the rest of it is still out there somewhere in the house, waiting in a drawer nobody has thought to check against it. Number 4. Signed Cartier, Chaumet, and Boucheron tiaras. Here's where the numbers stop being modest. The great French and English jewelry houses of the late 1800s and early 1900s produced tiaras for aristocratic clients, and while the truly famous pieces sit in museum vaults or royal collections under armed guard, a meaningful number of smaller commissions, wedding gifts, and private orders from these same houses have quietly circulated through estate sales for decades without anyone ever connecting the dots. Families see an old tiara with a faded, nearly illegible signature and assume it's a jeweler's mark from some forgotten local shop, rather than one of the most valuable names in the entire industry, a name that would make an auction house call back within the hour. A signed Chaumet diamond and pearl tiara from the early 1900s sold at auction in 2022 for just under $180,000. A smaller Boucheron piece with rose-cut diamonds in a floral design brought $95,000 the same year, and neither of those results made front-page news because sales like this happen quietly, house by house, season after season. These are not hypothetical numbers pulled from a fantasy auction. They're documented sales from people who had no idea what they owned until someone finally turned the piece over and read the mark properly under magnification. Because on these houses, the signature is often tiny, worn, and placed somewhere you'd never think to look, inside a hinge, along the interior curve of the band, beneath a removable stone that hasn't been lifted out in 100 years. If your tiara has any engraving at all, no matter how faint, get it read by someone who knows exactly what they're looking at before you decide it means nothing. Number 3. Georgian rose-cut diamond tiaras. This is the entry that separates casual sellers from people who actually understand what they're holding, because rose-cut diamonds look, to the untrained eye, like cheap glass. They're flat on the bottom, domed on top, with far fewer facets than the brilliant cuts everyone recognizes today from a modern jewelry counter, and that unfamiliar shape reads as dull and low quality rather than valuable to anyone who's only ever shopped for jewelry in the last 50 years. But rose-cut was the dominant diamond cutting style from the 1700s through the mid-1800s, and it exists today for one simple reason. The cutting technology that made it possible to shape stones this way by hand at scale, using the tools and craftsmen of that era, is genuinely gone and cannot be recreated the same way. A Georgian tiara set entirely in rose-cut diamonds, silver-topped gold mount, hand-fabricated frame, is not a lesser version of a modern diamond tiara. It's a completely different category that collectors specifically pursue, because so little of it survived intact through 2 centuries of wars, remounts, and careless resizing. A documented Georgian rose-cut diamond tiara in good condition, no replaced stones, no modern soldering, has sold for $40,000 to $120,000, depending on carat weight and provenance. The detail that catches almost everyone off guard. Hold it under strong light and look at how the stones sparkle. Rose-cut diamonds produce a soft, gentle glimmer, rather than the aggressive fire of a modern, brilliant cut. People mistake that softness for a sign the stones aren't real. It's actually one of the clearest signs that they are. Number 2. Edwardian garland-style diamond tiaras. The Edwardian era, roughly 1901 to 1910, produced some of the most delicate lace-like tiara work ever made, using platinum for the first time in fine jewelry because it was strong enough to hold diamonds in impossibly thin, almost invisible settings that would have been structurally impossible in silver or gold. The garland style borrowed motifs from 18th century French decorative art, ribbons, bows, laurel leaves, all rendered in diamonds so finely set that the metal practically disappears, and the piece looks like it's made of nothing but light suspended in midair. And that airy, delicate quality is exactly what gets these pieces dismissed by the people who inherit them. They don't look substantial. They don't have the weight or the bulk that people associate with serious jewelry. So families assume something this fragile-looking must be a later reproduction made for costume or theatrical use, rather than the real thing. A genuine Edwardian garland tiara in platinum with old European cut diamonds, still in its original fitted case with the maker's velvet lining intact, sold at a major auction house in 2023 for $215,000. Even smaller, simpler garland tiaras without provenance regularly bring $25,000 to $60,000 once someone confirms the platinum setting and the old cut stones under magnification. The mistake people make is judging weight and boldness as proxies for value. In this specific category, delicacy is the entire point, and it's exactly what the finest platinum work of that era was capable of producing when placed in the right hands. Number 1. Belle Époque natural pearl and diamond tiaras. And here we arrive at the piece that costs families the most money of anything on this entire list. Because the mistake isn't about ignoring an ugly tiara. It's about misreading a beautiful one that everyone in the family already loved and admired without ever questioning what was actually inside it. Natural pearls, pearls that formed entirely without human intervention inside a wild oyster, were, before the 1920s, more valuable than diamonds of equivalent size, sometimes dramatically so. A Belle Époque tiara combining natural pearls with old-cut diamonds represented the absolute pinnacle of what a jeweler could produce at that moment in history, reserved for clients who could afford the very best of everything. The problem is that almost every pearl produced since the 1920s is cultured, meaning a farmer deliberately started the pearl growing inside the oyster on a schedule, and cultured pearls, while still valuable, exist in a completely different price bracket entirely. You cannot tell a natural pearl from a cultured one by looking at it. Not with your eyes, not with a jeweler's loupe, not with any test you can run at home no matter how carefully you look. The only way to know for certain is an X-ray examination at a proper gemological laboratory that specializes in exactly this question. And here is the number that should make you stop everything before you sell. A documented Belle Époque tiara with confirmed natural pearls sold at auction in 2024 for $410,000. The same tiara, if those pearls had turned out to be early cultured pearls instead of natural ones, would likely have sold for a tenth of that figure or less. Families inherit these pieces constantly, assume the pearls are simply pearls, and either sell them based on a rough estimate or, worse, have them restrung by a jeweler who has no idea what he's actually handling and no reason to ask. If you own anything from this era combining pearls and old-cut diamonds in a tiara or bandeau format, do not let anyone touch it, restring it, or price it until a proper lab has looked at exactly what's inside those pearls. That single test is the difference between an interesting family heirloom and a life-changing sale. Every piece on this list survived for the same reason. Somebody at some point decided it was too old-fashioned, too delicate, or too strange-looking to wear again, and put it away instead of throwing it out. That single decision, made decades ago by someone who had no idea what they were actually protecting, is the only reason any of these tiaras still exist to be discovered today. The families who eventually find out what they're holding almost never guessed it from looking at the piece itself. They found out because someone finally turned it over, checked the marks, and had the stones properly examined instead of assuming they already knew the answer just from a glance across the room. So before you clear out another box, before you hand anything off to a buyer who's in a hurry to make you an offer, go find that tiara wrapped in tissue paper in the back of a closet somewhere. Turn it over. Check the mount. Look for a signature you might have walked past 100 times without ever reading it properly. Hit the like button if even one of these surprised you today. Subscribe to the channel because we go this deep on every single video we make. And drop a comment down below telling me which one of these you think might actually be sitting in your house right now. I read every single one of them, I promise you that. And whatever you do, no matter how confident you feel, do not sell before you check.